Good morning. So I came across, I had to share this with you guys this morning. I came across a J.C. Penney catalog from 1970. And I wanted to see, because we're talking about Joseph's robe this morning. Do any of you wear a robe that looks like this still have it in your closet from 1970? Anybody have that? I think that's actually what they wore in the Weber Broadway play, Joseph in the Technicolor coat. I mean, that was what they were wearing in 1965. But, so nobody has this still in their closet? Okay. So I kept looking, and I found, how would you all like to go to school in this tomorrow? How about this outfit? I actually had those red pants, and I had a striped shirt like that when I went to elementary school. So any young people want to go to school in that tomorrow? All right, for you, any high schoolers here, any teenagers here? I thought, what about this, you teenagers? How about this outfit? So check it out right now. I do want to point something out in this photo to all the teenagers here. Look at the shades on this guy. Do you recognize those shades? Because that's exactly what you all are wearing today. Exactly the same style, the old aviator style. So that's happening. I really like the guy in the green. If you wanted St. Patrick's Day, you could sport that one. When March comes around. But I didn't want to leave the parents out, so hey, how about dropping your kids off at school in these outfits, huh? How about that, right? Wouldn't that be great? How to embarrass your kids on day one. There you go, right there. So they say it's the clothes make the man or the woman. And we're talking actually about not a piece of clothing. In fact, if you look at this story about Joseph, you find that this robe, this piece of clothing, becomes a recurring theme in this story. And we're talking about this robe, but before we get in that, we actually see that some things are starting to already set Joseph up to create hatred. His brothers are hating him. They don't like him. But the first thing is that he does in the story is he's giving it says it gives bad reports about his brothers. He's out in the fields keeping sheep with his brothers, but then he would go back and tell dad about the stuff that his brothers did out in the field. He would give a bad report. And actually the Hebrew suggests that these were fabricated or embellished reports. And so Joseph would go to dad and say, hey, you'll never guess what Levi did today. You'll never think about it. And he would tell these stories or these tales, or what we might call, Joseph was actually in the Bible the first tattletale in the Bible. And the problem with being a tattletale is, as parents, you and I have to discern what's going on. When we get a report from our children, we have to kind of discern their heart. I know there were times when one of my daughters would bring a bad report about the other daughter. In fact, it still happens. I get reports from the other one and what they're doing in college and then what the other one's doing, so they come with their reports. And so sometimes I learn more about my daughters through the other daughter. But part of that is I, as a parent, have to discern the intent of my child's heart. Are they coming and bringing this to me to get the other person in trouble, or is there a real problem here? I have to discern, is there harm being done, and do I need to step in as a parent and address the harm that is being done and intervene, or are they just bringing this information to me because they want to get their brother or sister in trouble? So I have to kind of weigh the intent. That I have to help discern where their heart is. Because the problem with being a tattletale is that the other person doesn't even know it's coming. They don't even, there's no information. And then you go and you tell this report, and it may be, and usually it's only kind of like their perspective on the situation, right? So I know when I gave a bad report about my brother, it was only how I saw things or the things that he had done in the situation. He hit me. I didn't tell him about how I hit him first, so I leave out important details in the story. And so young people may think about that. Are we also bringing the whole truth to our parents when we bring that report of what's going on? And as parents, we have to discern, and we actually have to hear both sides of the story, don't we? And, even our justice system allows for the accused to give an explanation. When we're tattletales, we're not allowing for that explanation to happen. We're trying to get our parents to exercise authority or punishment over our brother and sister, and we as parents need to discern really the intention of that child when they come to us with those reports. And so I can imagine that if Jacob really listened to Joseph on these, that he kept listening to these reports, who's being elevated in Dad's eyes? Joseph, right? And who's being not elevated in Dad's eyes, the other brothers. And that's also another intention. And maybe that contributed to this idea that Joseph was the favored son. And actually, that's why he gets the robe. We find out that Joseph is the favorite son. Part of the so his dad may have been listening to these things and thinking to himself, oh yeah, you're such a good son, Joseph, and all those other boys are so bad. You're really the good son. Because really, as children, that's what we want our parents to see us as. And so the other thing that happens, though, is Joseph gets this robe from his dad. He gets this beautiful robe, and it mentions it had long sleeves, which meant it took a lot of material to make this. It wasn't a cutoff. It used a lot of expensive material to make this robe. And so he gave this to Joseph. So Joseph had special status in the family because of this robe. Now, how often do you think Joseph wore this robe? All the time, right, yeah. Because even when he goes out to look for his brothers in the fields, what's he wearing? He's wearing the robe, right? Everywhere he goes, he's wearing the robe. Can you imagine Michael Phelps coming back with all his gold medals? I would expect when he first comes off the plane, he's got the gold medal on. But what if you go out to a restaurant and there's Michael Phelps and he's wearing a gold medal? Or you see him on the street in Fells Point and he's still wearing his gold medal. You know, if you saw Michael Phelps wearing his gold medal all the time, what would you think about Michael Phelps? You would think he was conceited, arrogant. That's exactly how the brothers were viewing Joseph at this point. And it says when he got that robe and he started wearing it around as a status symbol and showing it off to his brothers, they actually hated him, it says, more. They already hated him because he told stories about him. Now they hate him even more because he's now flaunting his status. He's a flaunter of status in front of other people. And I'm sure you can identify people in your families or people at work or even people in the church that flaunt status. And so they hate him even more because of this. But so Joseph's already got 2 strikes against him, but then the one that puts everybody over the edge, puts everybody over the top, is that Joseph has these 2 dreams. And in the dreams, he is the ruler and the leader of his whole family in these dreams. Now, he has the first dream, and the one dream is not really, is important, but not that important. See, in the culture in which Joseph was living and his family was living, to have a dream was just a dream. But if you had a second dream, the same as the first dream, it was considered a message from God. So now, Joseph's got a message from God about his family and about what's going to happen in the future and about God's plan for his life. Now, at this point, I want to go to Joseph. Joseph, just keep it to yourself. Because you take the bad reports, you take the special status and the conceitedness in which maybe he was presenting himself, and then you add to it this message from God. Hey, I got this message from God, guys. And this is what God told me. And you guys are going to bow to me. Not a good idea. Not a good idea to share that message with your brothers who already hate you and are jealous of you and are upset with you. And so he just adds fuel to the fire. He just threw a bucket of gasoline on their hatred. And if he had posted this on Facebook, this is what they would have said. The brothers would have given him a thumbs down or the angry emoticon, that you're angry. And so that's where the brothers are. They couldn't take it anymore. So you kind of understand these dynamics. So I wonder how much, I've got to assume that Dad knew what was going on with the boys. And so it makes me wonder, why does Jacob send Joseph by himself in his robe to go check on his brothers? He's outnumbered. They hate him. Dad, why are you sending them? Well, I'm going to speak in very general terms here, but I would say this. There's a part of the story you didn't hear this morning. And part of the story is that their sister was assaulted by one of the men in Shechem. And that sister was then, Levi and Simeon went to avenge their sister's honor, and they killed several of the men and the family members of that family in Shechem. And then they brought their sister home. So when Joseph hears that the boys are in Shechem, as a dad, he's worried about his boys. His concern and his worry for his boys and what might be happening in Shechem now, based on what had happened in Shechem before, now has him sending his one and only son, Joseph, to go find out if they're okay. I think his concern and his worry drives him to send Joseph by himself to find out. Also, notice that when Joseph gets to Shechem, who's not there? The brothers. So something must have happened in Shechem to make them move on to Dothan. Now that's important. Keep Dothan in mind, and for at least hold on to that thought. So why Dothan? Why are the brothers in Dothan? Hold on to that question just for a couple minutes, because we're going to get back to that. So Jacob sends Joseph to the sons, and they see this guy, if you can imagine the brothers, sitting around. They've been herding sheep all day. Maybe they're sitting around the campfire, kind of getting things ready, having a meal. And they see off in the distance their brother Joseph. And how do they know it's Joseph? He's wearing a robe, man. He's wearing his gold medals. They can see it blinging all the way across. And so they can see him coming, and their response is, here comes that dreamer. Their response is, here, it's derisive. It's like they can't stand him. So they actually develop this plot to kill him. They actually want to get rid of him once and for all. He's all by himself. He's got no one to protect him. He's vulnerable. Let's take advantage of Joseph. And so Joseph is coming towards them, and then this plot starts to unfold. They're just sitting around, they're just talking about what they're going to do. Now, what the brothers don't realize at this moment, that even in this plot, even in this little twist happens because they don't realize that all the evil that they want to do to their brother, this plot that they're devising, is actually going to bring about God's plan for the fulfillment of the dream. I want you to think in for a second. It's kind of maybe hard or counterintuitive for us to get our minds around, but think about this. Their plot is actually what gets Joseph to Egypt, where he becomes a leader in Egypt and where God continues to bless him, and he rises in leadership in Egypt and actually gets to the position in Egypt where he's able to save his whole family from a famine. All his brothers, the brothers who hated him and are trying to kill him right now, he ends up saving later. And we're going to hold on to that thought too. So I see God at work here. I see God intervening in these very harsh events and realities that Joseph is facing. So a couple ways that I see that Joseph is still in God's hand and God's plan is still in control here. Because one thing that happens is Reuben. That even though these brothers are plotting evil and harm to Joseph, I want you to notice that there's Reuben. What does Reuben do in the midst of this plotting? He actually convinces the brothers not to go through with killing Joseph. He comes up with another plan. He kind of figures out, maybe because I don't want them to kill Joseph, my brother, but maybe we'll just throw him in a pit, So they devise this other plan. And Reuben's the one that convinces them to do that, to not harm Joseph and kill Joseph. So why does Reuben do that? Well, that's because Reuben's the firstborn. Reuben's the eldest brother. And in that culture, it was Reuben's responsibility to make sure that all of his brothers came home safely. So he took his role and responsibility as eldest brother as very important. And I bet you he was just as upset and angry and hated Joseph too. But at some point he had to say, I can either let my hatred rule my heart, or I can let God rule my heart. I can let hatred rule me, or I can let doing the right thing rule me. And he wanted to do the right thing, even though maybe he hated Joseph just as much. But his desire to be accountable and responsible overcame his hatred. Boy, do we need that message today, don't we? So in a day where we see hatred all the time, we need people who will do the right thing and not just hate, who will rise above the hatred and do the right thing. We need people like that today. We need Reubens today. So I see God working through Reuben in this whole plot to actually save Joseph. Even though he's going through he does get beat up, he gets thrown into a pit, God is still working through Reuben. The other thing that happens is that God sends a caravan of Ishmaelites. Remember Ishmael? That other brother from another mother? And so the Ishmaelites come by. Now, it's interesting because the reason the Ishmaelites come by on their way to Egypt is because they're in Dothan and not Shechem. Because Dothan was along the trade route to Egypt. So if they had stayed in Shechem, no caravan comes by to take Joseph to Egypt. But because they moved on to Dothan, why they moved on, we don't know. Was God working behind the scenes in some way to orchestrate God's plan? I don't know. Coincidence or God? But they end up in Dothan, and here comes the caravan of Ishmaelites, and Judah comes up with another plan. He probably called it a win-win. So he's like, we can do this win-win right here, guys, because we can do what Reuben told us to do, our older brother, and listen to our older brother and not kill Joseph, but we can also still get rid of him. Let's sell him into slavery into Egypt. That way it's a win-win. We still appease Reuben, and we get rid of Joseph. So Judah thinks he's pretty smart. And he comes up with this plan to send Joseph to Egypt, which is actually the beginning of the fulfillment of God's plan for Joseph's life. Here's the point. And I don't know if you can get your minds around this one. I have a hard time. This is one of the mysteries of the faith. That here's the thing. No act of evil or human free will can thwart God's plan of salvation. Nothing can stop God's plan of salvation coming true in our lives. We see that for Joseph, but I also want you to recognize that this happened in the New Testament too. You know the person. They came to him, some people plotted evil against him and plotted to kill him. They were the religious leaders. And they plotted to kill him and do harm to him, and they stripped him of his robe, and they beat him up, and they put him into a dungeon. And ultimately into a tomb. And they sealed the tomb so he couldn't get out. It was Jesus. Same thing happened to Jesus that happened to Joseph. People plotted evil to do evil to him, but God's plan of salvation could not be stopped, could not be thwarted. And who got the last win? God. And that's the thing, that no matter what goes on in our lives, no matter how hard life gets, God's plan of salvation for our life always wins in the end. God always wins. And I hope you know this morning that you are in God's hands all the time. That no matter what you and I go through in life, no matter how many wells we get thrown into, no matter how many times people plot evil against us, God's hand is still with us for our ultimate salvation in Jesus Christ. Is that good news to you? That you're always in God's hand no matter what? There's another twist in this whole story. That's one twist. Maybe hard to get our brains around, but here's the other twist. What we didn't read this morning is what happens next is the boys, being boys, come up with another plan for Dad. Like, how are we going to explain this to Dad? Has anybody ever fabricated a story before you went and told your dad? Anybody change the story before you actually get to God? I don't know how the hole in the wall got there, Dad, but I'll tell you, it was my brother's fault. But you think about this, and so they come up with this plan, and they take Joseph's robe, this status symbol, and they kill a goat from their herds, and they sprinkle the blood on the robe, and they take it to their father, and they say, Dad, he was killed by a wild animal. Now, I think it's interesting, if you've been here this summer and you've heard us, we talked about Jacob and what Jacob was like growing up. And Jacob also took some garments from his brother and killed a goat from the herds and fed stew to his father. So he dressed in his brother's clothes, fed a goat stew to his father, and pretended to be Esau and stole his brother's blessing from his father. So what's happening here is the deceiver is deceived. The boys use a similar plan to deceive their father that Jacob used to deceive his father. The deceiver's deceived. My dad would say it this way: the apple don't fall far from the tree. Where did the boys learn to do this? Had they been watching their father all these years, deceiving other people and manipulating other people, and they figured out a way to do it themselves? Maybe they learned it from dad. I want us to wrestle with this question this morning as families, as parents. What are we passing on to the next generation? What are we teaching? Because, and not just teaching, but what are our kids catching from it? Here, I've said it before, our behavior is caught more than taught. So there are times I look at my children and I go, oh my, what did I do to them? Because they catch and behave the way that I behave. And I see that in them and I go, I don't want them to do that. So I have to make a decision as a parent, what am I going to pass on? So to kind of illustrate this, how this works, I need a young person, I need a young person to volunteer right now, and I need you to bring your parent or parents with you. And parents, you have to be ready to be uncomfortable. I will tell you that. So nobody wants to volunteer right now. So Austin, I see Austin. Anybody else want to volunteer? I see his mom wrestling with him. Biafra, you want to bring your parents up here? Biafra? All right, come up, Mom and Dad. I'm going to, come on, Mom and Dad. It's all right. I'll be gentle. So, come on up. Yeah, come on up. Biafra, you can blame him when you get home from church today, because he's back there behind you going, yeah, get this right. So he just did that to you guys. So, all right. So, I want you to think about this right now. So, Biafra, you were born into this world, right? And these are your parents, right? You want to confess that? Okay. So what happened? You were born in this world, and when you were born, you were like, let me get this off here. So when you were born, sorry, I have a malfunction here with my illustration. So when you were born, the doctors came and they put this little baby in your mom's. Go ahead, you can take it, Mom. And they put this little baby in your hands, right? And this baby was just innocent, right? And they looked at you and they said, "Oh, he is beautiful. We love him. It's a miracle, and we are parents." Was that scary? Was that a scary moment as well as a beautiful moment, right? Yeah. And so they felt, and they wanted to do everything good for you in your life. They wanted to put good into your life. So, what are some of the good things that you guys wanted Biafra to get in his life? What are some good things you wanted him to catch in his life or take on in his life? What were some good things?
Generosity.
Honor.
Anything else? Those are good ones, right?
Believe in God.
So your faith. So there's some things you wanted him to catch on to. So I've got some green sand here this morning. This represents the good. So Mom, I want you just to sprinkle onto Biafra. We're going to pretend this is Biafra here in his bassinet. I want you to sprinkle some of the good stuff you wanted in his life. Just sprinkle a little bit of it around all over that you wanted him to catch and hold on to in his life. Yeah, that's good. All right, good. Got to save some for 11 o'clock. All right. Notice she wanted to get a lot of good in there, right? So here's what happened to you, Biafra. So your parents did all these great things and behaved and wanted to instill all these good things. And as much as they try, here's what happened. Some of it stuck to you and some of it just fell off. Some of it stuck and some of it didn't. So some good stuff stuck and some good stuff didn't. And she put a lot of green on there. I got to wipe some of that off. Ruining my illustration. So, do your dad or your mom ever teach you some bad habits? Now, don't say it out loud. So, there are also times I know that I pass on some bad habits to my children, right? And there are some things I pass on that I don't want to stick to them. But Dad, come over here and sprinkle some of the red sand which are maybe some of the bad habits he picked up from you, along the way. Maybe you were watching. Your wife is like nodding her head back here. She going, oh, man. And so, yeah, keep sprinkling. You got more than that. Come on. That's it. All right, so put that down. Notice how he's being real conservative with the red. He's like, oh, man. So, but here's the kind of good thing is thank God some of it doesn't stick, but some of it does. There's a lot of green and not a lot of red. Because they're good parents, right? But you still caught some stuff. Now, I could also do this with your friends. Your friends pour green and red, bad and good into your life, right? So you come up and you catch all this stuff. It's caught. It sticks to you, and some of it doesn't stick to you. So, what if God said, Biafra, I want you to get rid of some of this red in your life? How would you do that? Oh, yeah, hard question, isn't it? See, it goes on a lot easier and it comes off. But you could get it off, but it would take a lot of work, wouldn't it? And that's the thing. Sometimes the Holy Spirit comes to us and says, I want you to change this part of you. I want you to get rid of this bad habit or this part of your family or whatever you've held on to. I want your generation to let go of it, to change it. And it's going to take you actually a lot of work to do that. It comes off harder than it goes on. And so that's the question. What do we want to pass on to the next generation? What do you want to pass on to your kids and to the next generation? What is it that God is revealing in you to say, Biafra, I want you to take some of that red stuff, that bad stuff, and I want you to get rid of it. And and the Holy Spirit will help you do that work. Amen? All right, give these guys a hand. That was very brave of them to come on up. So, you guys saw this, right? Okay, I'm just making sure you saw it. So here's the thing, folks. This is also another question. What about faith? Does faith stick to our kids? Some of it does, some of it doesn't. But the best thing that I can do for my daughters, the best thing you can do for the next generation is grow your own faith. Because as young people watch us grow in our faith, it actually starts to stick to them. Because it's caught more than it's taught. And what do we want them to catch? We actually here in this church talk about sticky faith. We want their faith to stick with them so that when I just sent my second daughter off to college this week, and I'm officially an empty nester, but my daughter went off, and everything, I just pray that the good stuff stuck. As she goes into adulthood, that whatever she got from me, the good stuff sticks, and the bad stuff goes away, and that she becomes the woman of God that God has called her to be. That's my prayer as her parent. But the best thing I can do for my daughter is grow my faith. Amen.